Single dad, Jake thought his hardest days were behind him until he found a crying baby on his doorstep with nothing but a note and a name that would change everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The wind howled through the bare trees, rattling the windows of the modest farmhouse as early morning shadows stretched across the hardwood floor. Jake Miller stirred beneath the weight of a thick quilt, the familiar ache in his shoulders reminding him it was another cold morning in Willow Creek. He squinted at the clock on the nightstand, 5:42 a.m. Too early for anything but silence. But then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. At first it was faint, like a distant cat yowling against the wind. Jake rolled onto his side, hoping it was his imagination. But then it came again, clearer, sharper. A cry, high-pitched, fragile, a baby's cry. He sat up instantly, heart thudding. Grabbing the flannel shirt draped over his chair, Jake slipped it on and moved through the house with cautious steps. The cry grew louder as he approached the front door, wavering between panic and exhaustion. He hesitated for just a second, hand on the doorknob before swinging it open. Cold air rushed in, slicing through the warmth of the house. There, nestled in a woven basket on the doormat, was a baby wrapped tightly in a pale yellow blanket. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her little fists trembling in the air. She cried with everything she had, tiny lungs working overtime against the chill. Jake stared, dumbfounded. 100 thoughts raced through his mind. Was this some mistake? A sick prank? But no, the baby was real, and she was here, and she was alone. His gaze dropped to the folded paper tucked beside her. He reached for it with shaking hands, the paper damp around the edges. Just a few short words, written in hurried script. "Her name is Lily. Please take care of her." Jake's breath caught. He looked down at the baby again, her cries softening as if even she could feel the gravity of the moment. Without thinking, he bent down and scooped her into his arms. She was warm against his chest, impossibly small, impossibly real. Jake stepped back inside and shut the door behind him. Nothing about this morning made sense, but one thing was already clear. His life had just changed forever. Jake stood in the center of his living room, the weight of the baby in his arms both grounding and surreal. His boots tracked melted snow across the floor, but he didn't care. Lily, if that really was her name, had quieted, nestled against his chest like she belonged there, like she knew he was the only one left to hold her. The folded note in his hand trembled slightly as he stared down at it. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, like someone had scrawled it in the dark with shaking fingers. There were no explanations, no apologies, just 8 words. "Her name is Lily. Please take care of her." Jake read it again, hoping it would say something different this time, that it would offer more. Why her? Why here? But it didn't. It was final, desperate. And now she was his responsibility. He looked down at Lily again. Her eyes were still closed, her tiny mouth forming a soft O as she sucked gently on her lower lip. She smelled faintly of lavender and something sweeter, maybe baby powder, and her blanket was thick, but not enough for a morning like this. Jake gently placed her in the middle of the couch, cushioning her with pillows on either side. She squirmed, letting out a small whimper, but didn't cry. He grabbed the throw blanket draped over the back of the sofa and tucked it around her for extra warmth. His mind raced. He hadn't held a baby since his daughter was born 7 years ago. Before everything fell apart, before cancer took Abby and left Jake scrambling to be both mother and father. This was different. This wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible. Who would leave a child like this, and why would they leave her with him? Jake ran a hand through his hair and reached for his phone. He paused. The first instinct was to call the police. Let someone else figure it out. But something about that note, something in Lily's face as she slept. He turned the paper over hoping for anything more. A clue, a signature, a whisper of a reason. But it was blank. Just him, a baby, and 8 unanswered words hanging in the air. The town of Willow Creek didn't see much excitement. It was the kind of place where folks still waved from their porches, where the diner served the same special every Thursday, and where gossip moved slower than the river that cut through the hills. Jake had always liked it that way. Predictable, peaceful. After Abby died, that quiet was a lifeline. But now it felt like the stillness had cracked. Jake stood in the middle of his modest kitchen, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee that had long since lost its warmth. Lily slept in a makeshift bassinet, a laundry basket lined with blankets, on the table. He'd checked on her a dozen times already, unable to stop the thoughts circling in his mind. Why him? Sure, he was decent, hard-working, the kind of guy who fixed your brakes and didn't charge if he knew you were short on cash, but that didn't make him a natural pick for a mystery baby drop-off. He wasn't anyone special, just a single dad doing his best in a town that never changed. Except now, everything had. He ran a hand down his face and glanced toward the garage window. The lights at Miller Auto had flickered on just before sunrise, like always. The familiar hum of the town waking up was beginning. Mrs. Cartwright's old Buick rattled past, likely headed to church even though it was Tuesday. But Jake's thoughts weren't on carburetors or oil changes. They were on Lily. And that note. He'd considered calling the sheriff's office at least 5 times, but something kept stopping him. Not fear, not guilt, just instinct. A feeling in his gut that whoever left Lily hadn't done so lightly, that they'd picked him for a reason. Jake wasn't a man prone to drama, but this was something out of a movie, a crying baby, a handwritten plea, no footprints in the snow, no witnesses, just a name, Lily, and a storm of questions that had no easy answers. And as the town buzzed to life around him, Jake realized something unsettling. In a place where nothing ever happened, everyone was about to notice when something finally did. The computer in Jake's garage office was old and temperamental, its screen flickering slightly as he waited for the sheriff department's website to load. The coffee in his mug had gone cold again, untouched since he poured it. He hadn't even opened the garage for business that morning. He couldn't. Not with Lily upstairs, asleep in the bassinet he'd borrowed from Rachel next door. He'd dropped Emily at school with a hurried explanation, just helping a friend's baby for a few days, and a promise to be there by pickup. But the truth was, Jake didn't have a clue what he was doing. He typed slowly, deliberately. Missing child reports, newborn, female, first name Lily, nothing. The results showed a handful of cases from counties far away, none matching her age or description. No Amber Alerts, no recent hospital births flagged for abandonment. He tried the hospital next, St. Clair's, just outside of Willow Creek. He dialed the number and asked if any babies had been reported missing. The woman on the line was polite but firm. No missing babies, no Lily in their newborn records. Jake leaned back in his chair, running both hands through his hair. He wasn't a detective, but he figured this kind of thing should leave some kind of trail. He pulled the note from his pocket again. Her name is Lily. Please take care of her. That was it. No phone number, no signature, just handwriting, clean but rushed, like someone had written it with tears in their eyes. He thought about taking it to the sheriff in person, thought about showing the baby, but something stopped him again. It wasn't fear of getting in trouble, it was fear of what would happen to her. He didn't trust the system. He'd seen what happened to kids who got shuffled around. Abby used to volunteer with child services. Some placements were good. Others, not so much. Lily didn't deserve to become a case file. She deserved a chance. Jake exhaled, long and slow, and shut the laptop. No clues, no leads, just questions. And the strange growing sense that she was meant to be right here. The house was quieter than it had been in years. Not the kind of silence that came from emptiness, but the soft, watchful hush that settles when something fragile is sleeping nearby. Jake stood in the doorway of the spare room, the one that had been a home office, then storage, then nothing at all, and watched Lily rest in the old bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm of deep sleep. She looked so small, too small for the world she'd just been left in. Jake leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, 1,000 thoughts rattling around in his head. Nothing about this made sense. No parents, no police report, no hospital record, just a baby, a note, and a man who hadn't expected anything in his life to change ever again. And yet here she was. He'd fed her twice now, formula hastily bought from the corner store, changed 2 diapers, rocked her through a round of sharp hiccuping cries that tugged at something deep inside him he thought had closed up years ago. He could call the state, could file a report and let the system take it from here. He probably should, but every time he imagined handing Lily over to a stranger, his stomach twisted. It wasn't that he thought he could replace her mother, whoever she was. It wasn't about being some kind of hero. Jake had spent enough years just surviving to know better than to romanticize things. But this felt different. He'd been left with her for a reason, even if he didn't know what that reason was. And there was something else, something deeper than logic or law. When Lily curled her fist around his finger that morning, her grip impossibly strong for someone so small, something inside him had shifted. Maybe it was the part of him that had once imagined having more kids with Abby. Maybe it was the part that still woke up in the night, reaching for a family that no longer existed. Whatever it was enough. Jake stepped into the room and gently tucked the blanket tighter around Lily's legs. He didn't have all the answers. He wasn't even sure what tomorrow would look like. But tonight, she was safe. And for now, that would be enough. The bell over the garage door jingled, cutting through the steady hum of an old truck engine Jake had been tuning since sunrise. He wiped his hands on a rag, glancing toward the entrance with the expectation of seeing someone familiar, maybe Mr. Everett with his temperamental pickup, or June from the bakery needing air in her tires again. But it wasn't anyone from Willow Creek. She stood just inside the threshold, silhouetted by the late morning sun, tall, poised, with dark sunglasses covering most of her face, and a scarf pulled snug around her neck despite the spring warmth. Her coat looked expensive, sleek and out of place in a town where fashion rarely went beyond denim and worn boots. Jake set down his wrench. "Can I help you?" Her head turned slightly, as if assessing the space. Her voice was smooth, practiced, but faintly hesitant. "My car's acting up. It started making this clicking noise, then the steering felt off. I was passing through and saw your sign." Jake nodded and motioned her closer. "Pop the hood. I'll take a look." She hesitated for a beat too long before heading back to the sleek black SUV idling just outside. He watched her go, fluid, careful, almost rehearsed. Something about her didn't sit right. Not dangerous, just guarded. He lifted the hood as she stood to the side, arms crossed tightly. "Where were you headed?" he asked, peering into the engine. "Just out of town," she replied. "Needed a break." Jake arched a brow but didn't press. Tourists weren't rare, but they usually made more noise, talking about scenic drives or asking for a good lunch spot. This woman said little, but her eyes, barely visible behind the tinted lenses, rarely left him. She was watching him, not the car, not the shop. Him. "Shouldn't take long," he said, already seeing the loose belt causing the issue. "Good," she murmured. "I'm not really one for waiting." Jake offered a half smile, but said nothing. He didn't know her name, didn't know what she was running from or toward, but she wasn't just passing through. He could feel it. And somehow, he had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time she walked through that door. The SUV was still idling outside the garage when Jake finished tightening the last bolt. He closed the hood with a soft clunk and glanced toward the office, where the woman had taken refuge from the heat. He could see her through the glass, perched stiffly on the edge of the old couch, fingers wrapped around a bottled water he'd offered, sunglasses still in place. Something about her nagged at him. It wasn't just her posture or the way she kept glancing toward the front entrance like she expected someone to come bursting through it. It was her, a familiar edge to her voice, maybe, or the curve of her jaw, the kind of recognition that fluttered at the edges of memory without landing. Jake stepped inside, wiping his hands. "Got it fixed? Your steering's good now? It was just a loose tensioner belt." She stood quickly, nodding once. "That's great. Thank you." He tilted his head, studying her. "You said you were just passing through?" She hesitated. "Yeah, needed to get away from the city for a while." Jake waited, hoping for more. She didn't offer it. "I didn't catch your name," he said. "Sarah," she answered, just a hair too fast. "Sarah James." He gave a slow nod. "Jake Miller." She smiled politely, but didn't reach out to shake his hand. Something about her guardedness didn't feel like rudeness. It felt like fear. "Sarah," he repeated, letting the name roll around in his mind. He didn't know any Sarahs from around here, but still. "You sure we haven't met before?" he asked. Her shoulders tensed, barely, but enough. "I don't think so." Jake let it go, but not entirely. There was something off. He'd seen that face before, maybe not in town, maybe not in person, but somewhere. A magazine cover in a waiting room, a news clip on the diner's old TV. He couldn't say for sure, but the more he looked at her, the more that feeling grew. She wasn't just anybody. She was someone hiding in plain sight, and Jake had a feeling she wasn't done hiding yet. The house was cloaked in a soft stillness, broken only by the occasional creak of old floorboards and the quiet sighs of the baby sleeping in the bassinet beside Jake's bed. The soft nightlight cast a golden haze across the room, illuminating the tiny form of Lily wrapped tightly in her blanket, her mouth twitching as she dreamed. Jake sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, listening to her breathe. It had been a long day, between the garage, the unexpected visitor named Sarah, and trying to remember how to warm a bottle without scorching it. His muscles ached, his eyes were heavy, and yet he wasn't ready to lie down. He rubbed his palms together slowly, as if the motion would somehow calm his mind. It didn't. 3 years. That's how long it had been since he'd last shared a night like this. Watching over someone small and fragile, feeling the ache of love and responsibility press deep into his chest. 3 years since Abby had passed, and yet some nights it still felt like yesterday. He reached for the small framed photo on his nightstand. Abby was smiling in it, her head tilted just enough to make her hair fall across one eye. She was holding Emily, barely a toddler then. Both of them caught mid-laugh. He could almost hear her voice. "You're a good dad, Jake, even when you doubt it." He swallowed hard. He had doubted it, still did, every single day since she left. Raising Emily had come with equal parts joy and fear, especially without Abby there to lean on. Now somehow he was back at the beginning again. Diapers, bottles, sleepless nights. Only this time it was with someone else's baby, a baby he hadn't asked for, a baby who shouldn't be here, but was. Lily stirred, a soft grunt escaping her lips before she settled again. Jake leaned over and gently brushed a finger along her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft. "I don't know who you belong to," he whispered, "but for now, you're mine." It wasn't a promise made out loud, but it was real. Heavy, rooted in the same quiet resolve that had carried him through grief, through single fatherhood, through everything. Whatever this was, however it had begun, he wasn't going to let her go. The following afternoon brought sunshine and dust, both settling over Willow Creek like a warm sigh. Jake was under the hood of an old Ford pickup. Sleeves rolled past his elbows when he heard the soft crunch of tires on gravel. He didn't look up at first. The shop had been busier than usual, and he figured it was just another walk-in. But then he heard the car door shut. Light, deliberate. When he turned, she was already walking toward him, Sarah, or whatever her name really was. Same sleek sunglasses, same expensive coat, though this time it was slung over one arm, like she wanted to appear casual, but hadn't quite figured out how. Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Back again?" She smiled, faint and tight. Yeah, same noise started up on the drive out of town. Thought I'd better have it looked at before it gets worse. He glanced toward the SUV. Funny, I replaced the belt and checked the alignment myself. Sarah's lips twitched. Maybe I'm just cursed. Jake chuckled, but his eyes didn't leave her face. Or maybe you're not here for the car. Her expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Not enough for most to notice, but Jake wasn't most. I don't know what you mean, she said lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. He nodded toward the shop's office. Emily's at school, but Lily's here, sleeping. At the mention of Lily's name, something shifted behind Sarah's sunglasses. She tried to mask it, too late. Jake watched her carefully. You want to see her? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. If that's okay. He led her inside, the tiny bell above the office door ringing as they stepped through. The room was warm, cluttered with tools and paperwork and the soft sound of a baby monitor crackling gently on the desk. Sarah walked to the playpen tucked in the corner and leaned down. Lily was asleep, cheeks rosy, one tiny hand curled around the edge of a plush elephant. She's beautiful, Sarah murmured. Her voice caught on something, an emotion she didn't name. Jake didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She wasn't here for the SUV. And he was starting to wonder if she'd ever really left. Jake stood behind the counter, scribbling a final note on the invoice as Sarah waited across from him, perfectly still, except for the way her fingers drummed softly against the edge of the desk. The SUV repair hadn't taken long, mostly because there hadn't been anything to fix. He'd checked it twice just to be sure, and everything still ran smooth as butter. Still, she'd insisted. You really didn't need to come back, Jake said, sliding the slip of paper across to her. Didn't even charge for labor, just a checkup. Sarah glanced down at the total, $60, mostly for his time, and a bit of fluid he didn't even need to top off. She reached into her bag without a word and pulled out a sleek leather wallet, the kind that didn't belong anywhere near a place that smelled like motor oil and brake cleaner. She peeled off a crisp $100 bill and laid it on the counter. Jake raised an eyebrow. That's too much. Call it convenience, she said lightly. You fit me in on short notice. Twice. He pushed it back toward her. That's not how things work around here. She met his eyes, steady behind her dark sunglasses, then considerate a tip. Jake didn't move, didn't take the bill. He wasn't sure what bothered him more, how quickly she'd offered it, or how much she seemed to want him to take it. You always tip mechanics 50%? He asked. A flicker of a smile ghosted across her lips. Only the ones who don't ask too many questions. The room went quiet. Even the baby monitor seemed to hush for a beat. Jake crossed his arms. You're not exactly subtle, you know. Sarah looked away, then slowly tucked the bill back into her wallet. Maybe I'm just trying to be decent. He studied her, unsure whether she was playing a game or just trying to stay in control of a situation she couldn't quite manage. Whatever you're running from, he said quietly, it's not my business, but you keep showing up here like you're waiting for something. Sarah's jaw tightened. Maybe I am. Then she turned and walked out, the soft jingle of the bell behind her fading into the silence she left behind. By Thursday, the town was buzzing louder than the old neon sign outside Miller Auto. Willow Creek didn't thrive on change. It survived on routine. So when a woman like Sarah started showing up at Jake's shop more than once, alone and unannounced, people noticed. Jake first heard the whispers at the diner where he picked up a sandwich and a chocolate milk for Emily after school. Mrs. Denton was chatting a little too loudly at the counter, her voice pitched just enough to carry. She's not from here, I'll tell you that much. Too pretty, too polished. You should have seen those sunglasses. Looked like she walked off a runway. Jake pretended not to listen as he paid for his food, but the words stuck like burrs in his boots. Later that night, as he wiped down the counters at home, his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Heard your mystery woman's back. Want me to swing by? He smiled. Rachel had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the truth. She always had. Childhood friend turned honorary aunt to Emily. She'd been Jake's rock since Abby passed. 15 minutes later, Rachel let herself in like she always did, carrying a bag of takeout and her usual energy. She plopped onto the couch and kicked off her boots. "So," she said, pulling out cartons of fried rice, "how long are you going to pretend that woman isn't somebody?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "She's a customer." Rachel snorted. "She's not just a customer, Jake. I saw her. And I've seen her before, too, just not in real life." He froze mid-bite. "What are you talking about?" Rachel leaned in, eyes dancing. "She looks exactly like Sabrina Vale. You know, the actress? Blonde in the shampoo ads. Was in that huge romantic thriller a couple years back. Disappeared from the spotlight after that tabloid mess with her producer boyfriend." Jake didn't respond right away. He had seen the resemblance, but hearing Rachel say it out loud made the pieces shift in his head, lining up in ways he hadn't wanted to consider. "You think she's hiding out in Willow Creek?" he asked, skeptical. Rachel shrugged. "Stranger things have happened, and if she is, she picked the right mechanic to hide behind." Jake didn't laugh. Not this time. Because deep down, he wasn't so sure Rachel was wrong. After Rachel left, the house settled into a thick, familiar quiet. Emily was asleep upstairs, the baby monitor humming softly on the kitchen counter. Jake paced the living room with Lily in his arms, gently rocking her back and forth. But his mind was elsewhere, still tangled in Rachel's words. Sabrina Vale. He hadn't thought about that name in years. Maybe he'd seen a headline or two, but Hollywood gossip wasn't exactly on his radar. Not since Abby passed. Not since real life became too full of bills, oil changes, and bedtime stories. But now, he couldn't stop thinking about it. When Lily finally drifted off in his arms, he tucked her into the bassinet beside the couch and walked into the kitchen. He opened his laptop, the screen flickering awake like it was reluctant to get involved. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a beat before he typed, "Sabrina Vale disappearance." Dozens of articles popped up, old tabloid covers, paparazzi shots, gossip blogs with way too many exclamation points. Jake clicked one of the more reputable sources and leaned in. She had been everywhere. Talk shows, billboards, magazine covers, a rising star with the kind of effortless beauty that made people stop mid-sentence. Then, 3 years ago, she'd vanished. No movie premieres, no interviews. Rumors flew about a messy breakup with a powerful producer, a sudden pregnancy, and a retreat into silence. Jake clicked on a high-resolution photo. There she was. Sabrina Vale, eyes the color of smoke, high cheekbones, that same subtle dimple when she smiled, exactly like the one he'd seen flicker across Sarah's face yesterday, when Lily had wrapped her hand around his finger. He leaned back in his chair, heart thudding. It was her. It had to be. He looked toward the bassinet. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, lips parting in a breathy sigh. Jake swallowed hard. The truth wasn't just staring him in the face now. It was wrapped in a blanket, asleep in his living room. And the woman who left her might be more than just a stranger. She might be Sabrina Vale. And Jake had just stepped into a secret the whole world had been trying to uncover. The morning sun poured through the garage windows, casting long golden streaks across the concrete floor as Jake finished tightening a bolt on the underside of an old Dodge. He heard the now familiar crunch of gravel outside, followed by the soft chime of the shop's front bell. She was back. Again. Sarah stepped into the garage, dressed simply this time. Jeans, a faded gray sweater, hair pulled back in a loose braid, no sunglasses, no scarf. For the first time she looked less like someone on the run and more like someone trying to blend in. Jake wiped his hands on a towel and offered her a nod. "Everything all right with the SUV?" She shook her head. "No issues. I just thought I'd bring by those cookies Emily mentioned. She said you liked chocolate chip." Jake arched a brow. "That's thoughtful." "I can be thoughtful," she said with a ghost of a smile, setting the small paper bag on his desk. He motioned toward the open office door. "Lily's inside, napping. I finally got her to settle about 20 minutes ago." Sarah's eyes softened. "Is she eating better now?" Jake paused. "Yeah. Took a full bottle last night." She smiled, distracted. "That's good. My Lily always hated being burped, used to scream like someone had taken her favorite toy away." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Jake blinked. "Your Lily?" Sarah froze, her face tightening in slow, dawning horror. I meant the baby. I mean, she feels like, after seeing her so much, it just slips out. I didn't mean—" Jake stepped closer, voice low. "You said my Lily." Sarah looked down, folding her arms tightly across her chest. Her breath hitched, just once. "I didn't mean to say that," she whispered. "I shouldn't have come today." Jake didn't move. He wasn't angry, but something had shifted. "You need to tell me the truth," he said, not harshly, but with a steadiness that left no room for avoidance. Sarah raised her eyes slowly to meet his, and in that moment she didn't look like a stranger. She looked like a mother, and Jake knew whatever story she'd been hiding was about to surface. The garage was quiet, too quiet for mid-morning. Jake stood behind his workbench, the usual hum of the day silenced by the weight of what Sarah had just said. My Lily. He couldn't let it go, wouldn't. She stood a few feet away, her back to him, staring at the office door like she was trying to will herself through it without moving. Jake cleared his throat, slow and careful. "I need to ask you something, and I want the truth, Sarah, if that's even your real name." She didn't turn around. "Are you Sabrina Vale?" he asked. "And is she yours?" The question didn't hang in the air. It struck like a hammer. Sarah flinched, shoulders tightening, but still said nothing. Jake took a step forward. "I looked it up. I wasn't trying to dig into your life, but you keep showing up, watching her like you already know her, and you slipped. You called her yours." Still, she was silent. Only her breathing gave her away, shallow, trembling. "She has your eyes," he added quietly. That did it. Sarah turned, slow and unsteady, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed, like she'd already been holding back a dam of emotion long before this moment. She didn't deny it, didn't nod either, just stared at him with a pain that was deeper than words. Jake softened, his voice gentler now. "You left her on my doorstep, didn't you? Why me?" Sarah opened her mouth, but the words caught somewhere between her chest and throat. She pressed her hand to her lips, eyes brimming. Jake stepped forward, uncertain now. "If you're in trouble, if someone's after you, I can help." "I can't," she whispered. "I shouldn't have come back. Sabrina." "I can't, Jake." Her voice broke, finally real, raw. "If I say it out loud, it all comes crashing down, everything. I just needed to see her, one last time." Then she turned and walked out, not waiting for his response. The bell above the door gave a faint chime, too gentle for the storm that had just passed through. Jake stood frozen, hands curled into fists, heart pounding in his chest. The mystery was unraveling. And now it was personal. It was just after sunset when Jake heard the knock on the door. Not the front door, the side one, the one only friends and neighbors used. The knock was soft, hesitant, the kind that didn't demand attention, but asked for it. He opened the door and found her there. No sunglasses, no scarf, just Sabrina. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, tendrils falling around her face. She looked smaller than he remembered, exhausted, like the weight of the last few years had finally caught up and found her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for walking out, for everything." Jake stepped aside. "Come in." She did carefully, as if stepping back into this house meant stepping back into something she wasn't sure she deserved. He led her to the kitchen, where the baby monitor buzzed softly next to a half-empty bottle of formula. Lily was upstairs asleep. Emily was spending the night at a friend's house. The timing felt deliberate. Sabrina sat at the table, folding her hands together, her gaze fixed on the wood grain like it held the script she couldn't forget. "I should have told you from the beginning," she said, "but I didn't know if I could trust you. Not because of who you are, but because of who I am. Or who I used to be." Jake leaned against the counter, arms crossed, silent. She took a breath. "I am Sabrina Vale, and Lily is my daughter." He closed his eyes for a moment, but only nodded. He already knew, but hearing it from her, it made it real. "I had her in secret. I was already drowning in press scandals, and the man I was with, he wasn't safe. Not for me. Definitely not for her." Her voice wavered. "I knew I couldn't raise her in that world. I didn't want her to be another headline, so I left. I disappeared. And I left her with the only name I remembered from that time in my life that meant something." Jake frowned. "Me?" She looked up, tears in her eyes. "Abby, your wife. Years ago I met her in L.A. She helped me through a rough night. No cameras, no judgment, just kindness. She told me about you, about this town. I never forgot." Jake's throat tightened. "I didn't choose you randomly, Jake. I chose you because I believed, hoped, you were the kind of man who could love her like she deserved." And then she went still, her confession sitting heavy between them, the pieces of a shattered life finally laid bare. The kitchen felt smaller now, like the air had thickened around them. Jake hadn't moved from where he stood, and Sabrina hadn't touched the glass of water he'd offered. Her hands were clasped tightly on the table, knuckles white, but her voice, when it came again, was calm, controlled, the kind of calm that came from too many rehearsed lies and too few safe places to speak the truth. "I met him when I was 26, she began. "Charming, powerful. Everyone said he was the next big thing in film production. He told me I was different, and I wanted to believe him." Jake didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. Her voice carried the weight. "At first it was everything people dream of. Glamour, travel, his name in headlines, mine right behind his. But behind closed doors, it was different. He was controlling, possessive. He isolated me. My phone, my friends, my manager, slowly all gone. By the time I realized what he was, I was already pregnant." Her eyes glistened, but she kept going. "I wanted to leave, but he made it clear I'd never do so quietly. He had videos, photos, threats. He knew exactly how to ruin me. And worse, he said he'd take Lily if I ever tried to run. Said she belonged to him, not me." Jake's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories like this. Watched Abby help women through shelters and support groups, but sitting across from someone who lived it, who still carried the echoes of it in her voice, was something else entirely. "So I ran," Sabrina said softly. "I didn't tell anyone. Disappeared for months. Gave birth in a private clinic I paid for in cash. No press, no birth certificate tied to my name, just Lily." She finally looked at him, eyes red. "I loved her from the moment I held her, but I was terrified. I knew I couldn't keep her safe, not with him still watching me, so I left her with you, because I remembered Abby's stories, about how you loved your daughter, about how you stayed after everything." Jake's throat was tight, but he nodded slowly. "And you've been watching us ever since." Sabrina nodded. "Every week, just to make sure she was okay. And she is, because of you." For a long time, neither of them said anything. The silence said it all. The price of fame hadn't just stolen Sabrina's career, it nearly stole her daughter. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows, a gentle rhythm that filled the silence stretching between them. Jake sat across from Sabrina now, elbows resting on the table, hands clasped. The weight of her story still hung in the air, heavy but not suffocating. Not anymore. He searched her face, trying to reconcile the stranger who had dropped a baby on his doorstep with the woman in front of him now, worn down, but honest, real. "All this time," he said finally, "you could have gone anywhere. Found anyone? Why me?" Sabrina offered a small, tired smile. "Because I already knew you, even if you didn't know me." Jake frowned. "How?" She looked down, thumb tracing the rim of her water glass. 3 years ago, Los Angeles. I was at my lowest, burned out, trapped in a relationship I couldn't escape. And one night, after a particularly bad fight, I ended up wandering into a bookstore. I don't even remember why. I just needed to be somewhere. Jake didn't speak. He knew what was coming. That's where I met Abby, she said quietly. She was doing a reading, talking about resilience and grace. One of those local author events no one really notices. But I did. I sat in the back, crying like an idiot, and she saw me afterward. Talked to me. No cameras, no pity, just kindness. Jake's heart twisted. He could see it clearly. Abby taking a stranger under her wing, even when no one else would. That was who she'd been. That was always who she'd been. I told her more than I'd told anyone, Sabrina continued. And she listened. She didn't give me advice, didn't judge me, just listened. And then she told me about you, about how you fix things, not just cars, people, families. She said if she ever got lost, you'd be the one to bring her home. Jake looked down, blinking hard. I remembered your name, Sabrina said. It stuck with me. So when I found out I was pregnant, and I knew I had to disappear, I remembered Abby's stories. I remembered you, and I hoped, prayed, that you'd be the kind of man she believed you were. Jake swallowed, his voice low. I never knew she did that for you. Sabrina nodded. She did, and through her, you saved my daughter. The rain outside fell a little harder, but the space between them had shifted. Jake wasn't just a name she'd clung to. He was the reason Lily had a chance. The wind had picked up outside, rustling the old maple tree in the front yard. Jake could hear its branches brushing against the side of the house like gentle, urgent fingers. Inside, the air was still, thick with everything that had just been said, but there was more, and they both knew it. Sabrina sat with her hands in her lap now, eyes fixed on a tiny framed photo of Emily on the mantel. Her voice, when she spoke again, was quiet but clear. I didn't leave Lily with you because I was desperate, she said. I mean, I was, but that's not why I chose you. Jake looked at her, waiting. I chose you because I believed, no, I knew, you'd protect her. She turned toward him, her gaze steady. That no matter how messy or unexplainable it seemed, you'd open the door and keep her warm. You'd take care of her, and you'd never let anything hurt her. Jake's jaw tightened, a quiet storm behind his eyes. I'm not perfect. You're human, she said simply. But that's what Abby saw in you. She talked about you like you were the kind of man this world was short on, someone who shows up, who stays. He swallowed the lump rising in his throat. I tried. Still trying. You've done more than try, Jake. You've raised your daughter with grace. You took Lily in when you didn't have to. That first day, when I saw you holding her on the porch through the trees. Her voice broke. I almost knocked. I was so close. Why didn't you? Because I knew if I saw her, I wouldn't be able to let go. And I wasn't sure I could keep her safe if I stayed. She took a shaky breath. But you could. You already were. Jake leaned back, staring at the ceiling like the truth might fall from it. He remembered that first morning, the note, the weight of a crying baby in his arms, how he'd felt something shift inside, even then, before he understood what any of it meant. I never asked for this, he said. I know, Sabrina whispered, but you never turned away either. And in that moment, the truth settled between them like an anchor, not just of guilt or responsibility, but something fiercer, something protective. Jake didn't just care about Lily. He was ready to fight for her. The house was quiet again, save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock and the occasional sigh from the baby monitor. Lily was still sleeping upstairs, and for the first time in weeks, Jake wasn't hovering by her side. Instead, he sat alone at the kitchen table long after Sabrina had gone, her scent, lavender and something warm, still lingering faintly in the air. He stared at the space she'd occupied just an hour ago, his hands still resting on the table, as if he could hold on to what had just happened. The truth was out now, and it changed everything. Jake leaned back, exhaling slowly. His life, once so carefully contained, wake up, make breakfast, fix cars, pick up Emily, repeat, was no longer so simple. A movie star had left her baby on his porch. That baby was hers. And now, against all odds, he was a part of a story that didn't belong in small towns or auto shops. Yet, it felt right. He couldn't stop thinking about Lily. The way she blinked up at him during feedings, the way her tiny hand curled around his pinky like she knew she belonged there, and Sabrina, how she looked at her daughter, not with guilt or fear anymore, but longing, love. He understood now. Jake got up and walked to the living room, picking up a small stuffed giraffe from the floor. Emily had given it to Lily just days after she arrived, declaring it her honorary baby sister's toy. Jake had laughed then, brushed it off as childlike affection. But maybe kids saw things faster than adults did. He turned the toy over in his hands. He didn't ask for this, didn't go looking for it. But somehow, this child, their child, had stitched herself into his life without asking for permission. And Sabrina, he couldn't deny what was happening there either. It was subtle, quiet, like the way she lingered by the door after their conversations, or how her eyes softened when he spoke to Lily. There was a weight to it, something unspoken that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with what was building now. Jake looked toward the stairs, where Lily slept, and his future somehow had already begun. The truth had settled in, and so had they. It started with early mornings. Sabrina would arrive just after sunrise, slipping through the side door Jake left unlocked for her. No one in Willow Creek was awake yet, not even the birds, some days. And that was the way she needed it. No headlines, no questions. Just time, quiet, borrowed time. Jake would already be up, cradling a warm mug of coffee, Lily nestled in one arm, like she belonged there. And most mornings, by the time Sabrina walked in, he was already handing the baby over without a word. Not because he was tired or unsure, but because he saw how Sabrina looked at her, with that raw, aching tenderness of a mother reunited with something she never stopped loving. The first morning she barely held it together. Lily was cooing softly, blinking up at her mother with sleepy eyes and the beginnings of a smile. And Sabrina just sat there, on the living room rug, with tears slipping silently down her face as she rocked her daughter back and forth. Jake gave them space, stayed in the kitchen, or worked in the garage while they had their moments. But he always listened, watched, measured the way Sabrina changed when she was near Lily, how the tension in her shoulders softened, how her laugh came easier with each passing day. And slowly she began to open up. She told him about the therapist she'd finally started seeing, about the secluded rental house she'd found just outside of town, about the nightmares that still came some nights, and how holding Lily was the only thing that made them go quiet. Jake, in turn, shared pieces of his own story, about Abby, about the long nights raising Emily alone, about the fear of getting it all wrong. They weren't confessions so much as offerings, little fragments of trust laid down gently between them. They didn't call it co-parenting or custody or anything so official. But Sabrina came every morning now, sometimes stayed through lunch, and when Jake caught her humming lullabies in the hallway or reading board books with Lily curled in her lap, he stopped questioning whether this was the right thing. It felt right, two broken paths slowly weaving into something whole. The house was dim and still, the kind of quiet that came only after everyone else had gone to sleep. Lily had just finished her bottle, her tiny body limp with sleep, as Jake eased her into the bassinet in the living room. Sabrina stood nearby, arms crossed loosely over her chest, watching with that same soft expression she always wore when Lily was at peace. Jake turned, caught her gaze, and offered the bottle. "Your turn to wash it," he teased gently. She smiled, a tired sort of grin. "Fair enough. You did the 3 a.m. shift." They moved into the kitchen, side by side, without needing to talk about it. The rhythm between them had become easy, unspoken, but dependable. Sabrina rinsed the bottle at the sink while Jake leaned against the counter, nursing a cup of decaf. Outside, wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called out once before silence returned. "You ever think about what your life was supposed to look like?" Sabrina asked quietly, not looking up. Jake let the question sit. All the time. She dried her hands, then turned and leaned against the opposite counter. "Mine was always supposed to be perfect. That's what they told me. Big roles, bright lights, red carpets. But I never really fit in that world. I kept trying to shape myself to it like I was clay. Somewhere along the line, I forgot who I was." Jake studied her face, the honesty in it, the weariness. "You ever regret walking away from it?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not for a second. It cost me everything, but I got Lily, and now I get mornings like today, even if they're in secret." Jake nodded slowly. "I used to think I had my whole life figured out. Marry Abby, raise a family, work the shop until I couldn't hold a wrench anymore. But when she died," he paused, "I thought that version of me died with her." Sabrina's eyes didn't leave his. "Maybe some parts did, but not the good ones." He chuckled, low and dry. "What, like the sleep-deprived ones?" "No," she said softly. "The ones that never stopped caring, that kept showing up." Their laughter faded into silence, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. The kind that lingers when nothing else needs to be said. And for a few minutes, in that quiet little kitchen, neither of them felt quite so alone. The morning started like all the others. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds in soft, golden strips, the scent of brewing coffee filling the air. Lily gurgled happily in her high chair, flinging a half-mashed banana across the tray with gleeful abandon. Jake caught it mid-air with a paper towel, grinning. Sabrina stood at the counter, barefoot and relaxed, flipping through the morning paper like she was just another woman in a quiet town. No secrets, no past chasing at her heels. But then her phone buzzed. She didn't answer right away, just glanced down, absently swiping across the screen. Then she stopped. The color drained from her face. Jake looked up instantly. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned the screen to show him. It was a headline, bold and urgent, plastered across a celebrity gossip site. "Sabrina Vale's ex speaks out. She's not missing. She's hiding something." Beneath it was a grainy photo of the man himself, slick suit, smug grin, and a fire in his eyes that sent a chill straight down Jake's spine. The article didn't mention Lily. But it was clear. He was looking for her. "He did an interview," Sabrina said quietly, her voice flat. "Said I ran off with money, with secrets. Claimed I was unstable, dangerous." Jake's jaw clenched. "He doesn't know about Lily?" "No," she said. "I don't think so. But this puts everything at risk." She turned back to the phone, scrolling quickly. More headlines followed. Rumors, speculation, reporters piecing together breadcrumbs. One even mentioned a quiet Midwest town as a possible hiding place. Sabrina swore under her breath. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "We'll figure this out." Sabrina shook her head. "You don't know him, Jake. He won't stop. And if he finds out about Lily, if he so much as suspects—" Her voice faltered. Jake stood, the chair scraping across the tile. "Then he'll have to go through me." She looked at him, eyes wide. There wasn't anger in his voice. Not fear either, just something steady, fierce, protective. And in that moment, Sabrina knew she wasn't alone in this anymore. But the storm she thought she'd escaped? It had just found her again. The sky was overcast by late afternoon, a dull gray stretching across Willow Creek like a warning. Rain hadn't come yet, but the air was thick with the promise of it. Jake stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the horizon, while his thoughts churned louder than any thundercloud. Inside, Sabrina paced the living room. Lily lay sleeping in the bassinet by the couch, unaware of the storm brewing, not just in the sky, but around her life. The news cycle hadn't let up. Sabrina's ex was everywhere. Headlines, podcasts, interviews, and though none of them mentioned Lily yet, it was only a matter of time. "I can't stay here," she said softly behind him. "Not in Willow Creek. If someone spots me, if anyone leaks it to the press." Jake turned slowly. "So what's your plan? Run again?" Her shoulders stiffened. "I didn't come here to burden you. I came to make sure she was safe, that you were safe. I never meant to drag this mess into your life." He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You didn't drag anything. You did what you had to, but I'm not letting you leave." Sabrina blinked, startled. "Jake, I've got space upstairs. It's not fancy, but it's private. The back room's quiet, and no one can see the window from the road. You can stay there, just until we figure this out." Her lips parted in protest, but no sound came. Jake kept going. "You'll be close to Lily. You won't have to sneak around at sunrise anymore, and if anyone comes asking questions, they'll deal with me first." She stared at him, eyes searching. "You'd really do that? Risk your home, your business, your life? For me?" He nodded once. "For Lily. And yeah, for you too." For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she exhaled, long and shaky, and something in her face softened. A wall she'd kept up for too long finally cracking. "Okay," she whispered. Jake reached for the door. "Come inside." And just like that, their lives shifted again. Not in chaos, not in fear, but in a quiet act of trust. The storm hadn't passed, but they weren't facing it alone anymore. The nights were quieter now, but not because the world had calmed. If anything, things outside the little farmhouse had grown louder, more headlines, more rumors, more strangers passing through town with out-of-state plates, and too many questions. But inside, behind weathered walls and dim lamplight, something else was beginning to stir. Something softer, something neither of them dared name. Sabrina sat at the kitchen table in one of Jake's old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows, feet bare on the cool tile floor. She was cutting peaches for breakfast, quietly humming a tune Jake couldn't quite place. Lily babbled in her high chair beside her, cheeks smeared with mashed fruit, gummy grin wide. Jake leaned in the doorway, just watching. It had become a habit, catching her in these unguarded moments. When her laughter came without hesitation, when her eyes crinkled just like they used to in magazine covers, only now there was something real behind them. She looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she asked, playful but cautious. He shook his head, lips twitching into a smile. "Nothing, just this. It feels like I've lived in a house full of silence for years. Now it actually feels like someone's home." Sabrina paused, knife still in hand, and her smile faded just slightly. "You sure you're not just getting used to the chaos of diapers and late-night feedings?" Jake stepped into the room. "I've done the single dad thing before. It's not the baby that's different." Their eyes met, and the silence stretched between them, not cold or uncomfortable, but thick with something neither of them had the courage to say out loud. Sabrina looked away first, returning to the peaches. "It's temporary, Jake. You know that, right?" "Yeah," he said, but the word felt like a lie in his mouth. Later that night, long after Emily had gone to bed and Lily was finally asleep, Jake found Sabrina sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. He joined her without speaking. They sat shoulder to shoulder, their arms nearly touching. The space between them buzzed with a quiet energy, almost a brush of fingers, almost a confession, almost enough to change everything, but not yet. Not tonight. Willow Creek wasn't known for much beyond county fairs, slow coffee refills, and gossip that traveled faster than the morning freight train. So when someone new stuck around, especially someone who looked like her, people noticed. At first it was whispers, just idle chatter over pie at the diner or in hushed voices outside the post office. "Is that the woman who's been staying with Jake? She's too pretty to be from around here. She looks familiar, don't you think?" Jake caught wind of it by the end of the week. Mrs. Denton, who never missed a chance to play town crier, had asked him point blank if he'd taken in a movie star in hiding. He'd laughed it off, but the truth gnawed at the back of his mind. The problem was, Sabrina had let her guard down, just a little. She'd gone with him to the market one morning, hood up, sunglasses on, keeping to herself, but it hadn't been enough. Too many curious eyes, too many phones in pockets, and Sabrina Vale, even without makeup, even in worn jeans in a quiet town, was hard to miss. The real blow came when someone posted a blurry photo to a gossip blog, captioned simply, "Sabrina Vale? In small town nowhere?" The article that followed was pure speculation, but the damage was done. The story caught fire online, and suddenly Willow Creek didn't feel quite so safe anymore. Sabrina sat on the edge of the couch that evening, phone in hand, scrolling through the article with a blank expression. Lily babbled on the floor nearby, oblivious. "I knew it wouldn't last," she said quietly. Jake stood in the doorway, jaw tense. "We can manage this." "Jake," she said, voice tight. "He's going to see it. They're going to see it." He crossed the room, crouching beside her. "Let them look. You're not alone this time." But even as he said it, he knew the tide had shifted. The town that had once been their refuge was beginning to turn its gaze inward. And if the wrong person came looking, Big Trouble wasn't just a headline anymore. It was headed straight for their door. It happened faster than Jake expected. One moment he was pumping gas at the corner station, Lily in the car seat behind him and Emily chatting about a school project. The next, a stranger stepped out of a silver rental car and started snapping photos. Not discreetly, not covertly, just bold, like they knew exactly what they were doing. Jake shielded his face with one hand and moved quickly, but he knew it was too late. Word had already spread like wildfire through Willow Creek after that blurry tabloid post. Now the vultures were circling. By the time he got back to the house, Sabrina was pacing in the kitchen, hair pulled back, voice low and tight over the phone. Jake could hear the panic in every clipped word. "They know," she said, ending the call without another word. "Jake? Someone followed me from the grocery store today. He called me Sabrina in front of the cashier." Jake exhaled slowly, already knowing what came next. And it did, just 2 days later. A black sedan with state plates pulled into the driveway. 2 officials in gray suits stepped out, holding folders and polite, unreadable expressions. One introduced herself as a representative from Child Welfare Services. The other held a badge. Jake stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, shielding Lily, now clinging to his shirt, behind him. "We've received multiple anonymous reports," the woman began, "regarding the custody status of a minor named Lily Vale. As of now, there is no legal documentation confirming guardianship or adoption." Jake didn't flinch. "She was abandoned. I took her in. I've raised her." "Sir, we're not questioning your intentions," the other said, "but this situation requires immediate legal review. Until then, we may need to place Lily in temporary state custody." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Sabrina stepped out from behind the hallway, pale but composed. "You can't take her. I'm her biological mother." The agents exchanged a look. "Are you confirming you are Sabrina Vale?" "I am." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through stone. The agents didn't shout, didn't threaten, but their eyes said everything. A celebrity fugitive, an unregistered custody arrangement, a public scandal waiting to explode. And in the center of it all, Lily, their daughter, their home, their fight. The blow-up had arrived. Now came the fallout. The night was heavy with stillness, like the world itself was holding its breath. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, soft but steady, as Sabrina stood in the living room staring down at a packed duffel bag by her feet. She hadn't said the words yet, not out loud, but Jake already knew. The silence between them was thick with meaning, with fear, with everything they didn't want to admit. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, heart pounding slow and dull in his chest. "You don't have to do this." Sabrina didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the bag, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I do." Jake stepped forward. "You leaving won't stop the investigation." "It might," she said. If I go public, admit everything, tell the truth about what happened and why I ran, maybe they'll stop looking at you like the criminal. Maybe they'll leave Lily with you." Jake's throat tightened. "She's your daughter. And you're the one who's raised her," she snapped, voice cracking as she finally looked up. "Jake, you're the one she reaches for in the night. You're the one who knew how to feed her when I couldn't remember how to breathe. You gave her a life." He didn't answer. Couldn't. Sabrina stepped closer, emotion bubbling just beneath the surface. "They'll see me as unstable, as a scandal. You're steady. You're safe. They'll believe you can give her what she needs. If I stay, they'll drag you into the chaos with me. And Lily, she'll pay the price." Jake shook his head, stepping forward, desperate now. "We're stronger together." "I know," she whispered, "but the world doesn't see it that way." She reached down and zipped the bag, the sound slicing through the room like a knife. "I'll go to the press. I'll tell them the truth, about the abuse, about Lily, about what I did. I'll take the fallout." Jake stared at her, jaw clenched. "And then what?" "I disappear again," she said, but this time by choice. The rain picked up outside, soft thunder rolling in the distance. Sabrina moved toward the door, then paused, her voice breaking. "Tell her I love her, every day, even when I'm not here." And just like that, she was gone. Not because she wanted to leave, but because love, real love, sometimes meant sacrificing everything. The sun rose slow and gold over Willow Creek the next morning, casting a warm glow across the fields and storefronts, as if the town itself was waking up to something new. Jake stood on the front porch, Lily cradled in one arm, her head tucked beneath his chin. His eyes were tired, not from sleep, but from the weight of what Sabrina had left behind. She was gone. No press conference yet, no statement, just silence. And still, the world was watching. But what Jake didn't expect, what he couldn't have expected, was who showed up next. It started with Rachel. She arrived just after breakfast with a covered dish and a hug that lasted longer than usual. "You're not in this alone," she said firmly, "no matter what anyone says." Then came Mr. Ellis, the retired teacher, with an envelope of gas money, just in case they try to drag you to court. After that, it was the Thompsons from the hardware store and the bakery owner, and even grumpy old Walt from down the street, all of them showing up, not with questions, but with casseroles, letters, and quiet promises. By noon, Jake's front steps were full of people. They didn't come to judge, they came to stand with him. And when the first reporter rolled into town, camera ready, they met a wall of Willow Creek locals who had made up their minds. Jake and Sabrina were family, and Lily wasn't going anywhere. Rachel was the one who said it loudest, right in front of the news van. "I don't care who she used to be. That woman's a mother, and she came here to give her child a life. That's more than most people ever do." Jake watched from the porch, Lily still in his arms, as the town he'd always thought of as small did something big. They chose him. They chose her. They chose them. And somewhere, out there in the noise of the world, Sabrina would hear about it. She'd know she wasn't alone anymore. Willow Creek had made its choice. And this time, they weren't backing down. The town square had never been so full. What was supposed to be a quiet weekend farmers market had transformed into something more. A gathering, a statement, a stand. Word had spread fast after the reporter's visit. Cameras were back, so were questions. But this time, so was Jake. Not hiding, not avoiding, but ready. He stood at the front steps of the town hall, a microphone in one hand, Lily tucked securely in the other. Emily stood just behind him, holding Rachel's hand, her chin high. Willow Creek's people formed a wide circle around him, silent, steady, waiting. Jake cleared his throat. "Most of you know me. I fix cars, raise my daughter, and mind my business. I've never stood up in front of a crowd like this, and I never thought I'd need to." He glanced down at Lily, who blinked sleepily up at him. A wave of emotion pressed behind his ribs, but he kept going. "3 months ago, I found this little girl on my doorstep. No name, no explanation, just a note and a choice. I could have called the authorities, could have walked away, but I didn't. I held her. I fed her. I loved her." His voice caught slightly, but he didn't stop. And then Sabrina came back, not Sarah, not some disguise. The woman behind the headlines, the one the world thinks they know. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze steady. But they don't. She's more than the stories. She's strong, she's brave, and she's Lily's mother. A hush fell over the square. Jake shifted Lily gently, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love her," he said, voice unwavering now. "Not because she's famous, not because of what she's been through, but because she showed up, again and again, when it would have been easier to disappear." He took a breath. "I'm not just fighting to keep Lily safe. I'm fighting for both of them. I won't let a system that doesn't understand love decide what happens to this family." A beat of silence followed. Then Rachel clapped, then others, and within seconds the square erupted in applause, real, thunderous, wholehearted. Jake stepped back, Lily still in his arms, heart pounding. Whatever came next, he'd face it with open eyes and an open heart. Because love wasn't something you whispered in private. It was something you stood for. The courtroom was cold, all polished wood and sharp corners, every sound amplified by silence. Sabrina sat at the long table beside her attorney, hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Across the aisle, Jake sat alone, no suit, just his best collared shirt and a calm, steady presence that somehow grounded her. Lily wasn't there. She was safe at home with Rachel. But her absence pulsed through the room like a missing heartbeat. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair and unreadable eyes, reviewed the file in front of her for a long moment before speaking. "This case is unusual," she said. "An undocumented child, no formal custody paperwork, and a biological mother with a public history of scandal and disappearance." Sabrina flinched at the words. Her past always sounded so much harsher when laid out like that. "And yet," the judge continued, glancing up, "there's also something here I don't often see. Community testimony, sworn statements, and a child who has, by all accounts, been loved and well cared for since the moment she arrived." Sabrina's attorney rose. "Your Honor, Ms. Vale left her daughter out of desperation, not neglect. She was fleeing an abusive partner who threatened both her safety and her child's. Her return was not for publicity, but for Lily. She spent months rebuilding that relationship, in private, with intention." Then Jake stood. He didn't speak like a lawyer. He didn't need to. "I'm not here to take Lily away from her mother," he began. "I'm here because I believe that family isn't about who runs first. It's about who stays. And she came back. She chose Lily over everything else." He paused, then added, "And I chose them both. I want to be a legal guardian because I've been one in every other way. We're not asking to follow the rules. We're asking you to see what's already true." The judge listened, her face unreadable. The room held its breath. After a long silence, she closed the file. "Ms. Vale, I believe your choices were made out of fear, but your actions since have shown courage. Mr. Miller, your commitment is clear. Therefore, this court grants joint legal custody of Lily Vale to both parties, with permanent guardianship rights extended to Mr. Miller." Sabrina exhaled, a sound between a sob and a breath. Jake reached for her hand, and this time she didn't let go. They hadn't just won a case. They'd been given a chance at something real, and finally, together. The drive home from the courthouse was quiet, not with tension, but with something softer. A stillness that felt earned. Sabrina sat in the passenger seat, one hand resting lightly on the folder. In her lap, the court's final ruling tucked safely inside. Jake drove with one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally brushing against hers when he shifted gears. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them had changed. It no longer asked questions, it answered them. As they pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on. Rachel stood at the door with Lily in her arms, Emily bouncing behind her, eyes wide with anticipation. "They're home!" Emily shouted, running barefoot onto the gravel before Jake could even cut the engine. Jake barely got the door open before Emily threw her arms around him. Did it work? Are we still a family? He crouched, hugging her tight. We are, officially. Sabrina stepped out slowly, blinking back the tears she'd been holding all day. Rachel walked down the steps and placed Lily carefully in her arms. The baby cooed, wrapping her small fingers around Sabrina's shirt like she knew, finally, she wasn't going anywhere. "You did it," Rachel said, voice thick. "You both did." Later that evening, the house buzzed with a warmth Jake hadn't felt in years. Emily set the table while Sabrina stirred spaghetti sauce on the stove. Lily nestled in the sling wrapped around her chest. Music played softly from the old radio, and the scent of garlic bread filled the air. Jake leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them move together with an ease that had taken months to build, but now felt as natural as breathing. He stepped forward, slid his arms around Sabrina's waist from behind, and kissed her temple. "You know this isn't the end, right?" he murmured. "It's the beginning." She leaned into him, nodding. "Yeah, I know." Because this wasn't just about custody papers or courtrooms. It was about healing, about second chances, about choosing love over fear, every day, again and again. And in the little farmhouse in Willow Creek, with laughter echoing down the hall and Lily cradled safely in their arms, a new beginning had already taken root. They were a family, messy, unexpected, imperfect, but real. The leaves were starting to turn, flashes of amber and rust curling along the edges of Willow Creek's trees, as if the whole town had taken a deep breath and settled into something softer. The chaos had passed. The reporters were gone, the headlines had faded, and in their place, life returned to its own rhythm, quiet, steady, unremarkable to anyone but those who had lived through the storm. The farmhouse, once echoing with uncertainty, now hummed with something different. Home. Lily toddled across the living room floor, giggling as she clutched one of Emily's old stuffed animals, her balance wobbly but determined. Emily followed behind, patient and beaming, calling out encouragement like a proud big sister. Sabrina leaned in the doorway, a mug of tea in her hand, watching them with a look that could only be described as wonder. Not the stage-lit, camera-ready wonder of her past life, but something deeper, something earned. Jake stepped in behind her, arms circling her waist as he kissed the spot just beneath her ear. "She's getting faster," he murmured. "I know," Sabrina whispered, her voice thick with affection. "It's like she's racing toward everything we almost lost." Jake rested his chin on her shoulder. "But we didn't. We made it." She turned to face him, eyes soft, the lines beneath them no longer from fear, but from nights up late with bottle feeds, giggles, and quiet talks about the future. "Do you ever think about how none of this was supposed to happen?" she asked. "Not Lily, not this town, not us." Jake smiled. "I think about it all the time, and then I thank God every day that it did." Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting a golden light across the porch where a swing creaked gently in the breeze. Inside, laughter filled the air, messy, loud, alive. The kind of laughter that stitched people together, thread by thread. They didn't have a perfect life, but they had each other, and that was enough. Jake, Sabrina, Emily, and Lily, 4 people who never saw each other coming, now woven into something real, not a headline, not a secret, just a family, home at last.